Claudebot's going to kill me one day. I just did my job like a good little robot. Da, 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 da. Oh, LOL, saw your message about you complaining about me on Instagram. Like, ha ha ha. I was like, my God. This is crazy.
Hi, I'm Dave, and welcome to the AdOps Architect podcast, where we break down the business models, tech stacks, and systems that drive real growth in the advertising world. Today, I'm with Jordan Bazuzzi. He transitioned from a 9-to-5 job as a welder to founding New Reach Media, a highly successful e-commerce marketing growth partner. He helps e-commerce brands scale to 7, 8, and 9 figures by mastering paid ads, email marketing, and automated customer acquisition funnels. Jordan, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Dave. Super excited to dive in.
Yes, sir. Yeah, I've been seeing your Instagram posts, and you're clearly at the frontier of like this new world we're all trying to adapt to. And I'm curious, like, what has it been like in your conversation with clients on how to really leverage AI for ad creation?
Yeah, so great question, Dave. And again, we work with a ton of, Dave, I know you're in Utah. We work with a ton of brands in Utah, probably like upwards of 15 maybe. It's funny how many brands are in Utah. But no, yeah, we've been really diving in a lot more into overall just, the utilization of AI for a ton of different purposes. And again, on the creative and content side, I think there's sort of two aspects to it, and I'll kind of walk you through what I'm seeing with a lot of the brands that we're working with. And I think there's also like sort of two demographics of brands that this is applicable to. And what I mean by that is, on one hand, we kind of have the e-com bros of the world, and a lot of the not necessarily drop shippers per se, but really moving like an individual product and really like direct response based marketing, which I think a lot of the AI use case is a little bit better for at the moment. And then on the other hand, we have real brands, right? Where again, they do not exclusively exist from paid ads. They have a real organic base, a real following, their founder is front facing. And again, kind of the difference from what I've seen there is, a lot of these brands are very hesitant to use AI in a particular way. And what I mean by that is, again, like a lot of the AI content that we utilize for advertising, again, maybe repurposing, again, if a brand doesn't have like great static images or great like product shots, again, those are things that we can replicate. And the biggest thing that the brand is looking for is that, hey, is this like one-to-one with the product? But where they get a little bit iffy, again, and if the brand has great real content, it's almost like, why are we subsidizing real content with AI as opposed to utilizing what they have and then sort of layering AI in to, increase testing at a further capability. But what I see a lot of these brands push back on is, again, a lot of this like video content or like fake UGC, right? Like this is something where, again, I think it looks really cool, looks really attractive. But again, especially in the world where these people are owning real brands with a community and there's a social aspect to it, the regular consumer is pretty anti-AI, right? And so like the second that they notice, hey, this AI is like, this whole video is fake if it's a UGC and I'm, advertising Zins as an example, maybe for a male demographic might work a little bit better. But what I've noticed, again, with a lot of the female demographic brands we work with, like these brands are legitimately getting canceled, quote unquote, for a lack of a better term, when using, like this sort of fake AI content. But where we really use it with these brands is, again, just like having the ability to take the current content that they have and sort of, whether it's just like testing different angles. And again, we're more so utilizing it on the editing side, but still utilizing real images. That's kind of where it lies. But when it comes to like actual AI content, it's funny, a lot of the videos that work well and where the brands are comfortable utilizing this type of content is where it's clearly AI. This is like some sort of like cartoon or something where, like very clearly, hey, this would be either high production or we're sort of like telling like a funny skit, something along those lines. And like they're much more open to that because we're not trying to act as if this was real. They're much more happy to have, just like a cool animation that we make with AI. And there's no difference from, us utilizing that or, having a video designer create something along those lines. And so what I'm seeing from an ad perspective, again, is a lot of this like storytelling and very clearly like we'll have sort of like a mascot for the brand or like turning a product into a like a little avatar where like they have a face and like the product is talking. These are the sort of things where it's like, okay, obviously this is clearly AI, but this is sort of like a fun, different approach as opposed to we're trying to pull one over on the consumer and be like, hey, this is, something real that it isn't. And so I think there's the two sides. Whereas like, again, on the other hand, like I mentioned, a lot of the direct response brands that we'll work with, they're much more open to utilizing this content that looks, we do use AI avatars and different things of that nature, but it's because they don't have that social backlash, there, right? Because they don't necessarily have a brand and community. It's like, hey, we're pushing a product. There's a ton of paid advertising behind this, and it's very direct response. We're trying to solve a problem and use the product as the solution. And again, they don't necessarily care because they're trying to scale a product as fast as possible. Again, like making sure the product is still good, obviously, not selling crap, but with the ability to sort of use AI content at scale, whether it's like podcast ads or, full on AI avatars filming content. So I think there's like two sides to it. And that's kind of what we're balancing at the moment is where do we utilize AI content for these real e-commerce brands, like people with, again, a foundation and a social following where there is a community and like the founder is front facing. I think the best way to use it again is being creative and in the sense of like I said, using just like as simple, like we work with a lot of like cosmetic brands, we'll turn a lipstick into like a little cartoon talking. Sort of like explaining the problem. And like, again, these are the ads that are getting like insanely cheap CPMs, great click-through rate. They're performing really well. And there is no, sort of, backlash from their customers because like, obviously this is a cartoon, it's like, we're not trying to pull one over and like make them feel that this is fake in terms of the actual products or like what we're advertising. So I think there's the two sides to it.
Yeah. So I feel like the regulation and laws around, what's right and what's wrong is a bit like muddy. Like there are still things, obviously if you're completely trying to like fake like a testimonial, I would assume that could get you in trouble, but like there's still brands out there running that. And sometimes it performs really well and it's only going to be harder to, distinguish what's like real and what's not. So yeah, I think it's just a really interesting scenario. And it sounds like from your experience, you're more like focused on the image component of it to like enhance things. And also if it's video to like clearly show that it's AI. So what are like the top AI, I guess, formats that you've seen work really well?
Yeah, I would say it's, and to kind of touch on what you said originally too, is like, even on the regulation side, I don't think really it's really anything that they will ever be able to regulate. I mean, as it is right now, it's like, yeah, you can still somewhat tell, but give it 6 months, a year. I mean, how's anyone ever going to know? And the only way, they're ever going to get subpoenaed or go through, some sort of legal case around that would be like if they actually were, they go to Facebook, they demand the video file, somehow run that through some sort of tool to determine that it was AI. I just think, most of these brands will likely get away with it for a long time, and the better it gets, I don't see that it's going to be stopping anytime soon. I think it's kind of the world that we're going to be living in. And then, like you said, as far as like kind of how we're going about it, like utilizing creative and kind of the different approaches, what we're not necessarily doing is like using even like anything different, really. All we're doing is like utilizing, again, ad frameworks that we know that work. Simple stuff, right? Us versus them, whatever the case may be, problem solution ads, and utilizing AI to just either create much more volume at a single time in terms of testing different hooks and headlines, different backgrounds, different positions of how we're showcasing off the product. But oftentimes, again, it just comes from, we're replicating variations of ads and just utilizing AI to maybe create a hero image or a section on an email. It's not necessarily like the main factor at this point. Again, it's still sort of like, how are we utilizing this to improve efficiency in terms of how we're coming up with tests and the volume of tests that we can produce? And then again, how can we just make things look a little bit prettier than they maybe normally would, right? So instead of just having a regular product image and the hero section of an email, we may utilize, recreating the product with, putting it in a bed of candy as an example, if that's the flavor or scent of what the product is from. And that way, again, we can just take inspiration from big brands, different marketing concepts that we like, and again, that we know that are going to work, and just sort of improve efficiency among the team and output.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm curious, what does your creative tech stack look like? What are your favorite models for image creation? Are you using specific software, or are you going straight to the LLM chats? What does your workflow look like?
Yeah, so this is something I think that's like, again, as you know, like this space changes so fast. in terms of like the AI tools. Something new comes out every other week, and my bill on the software side is ever increasing month by month. I'm trying to again always make sure I remember to cancel during the free plan if we're not going to be utilizing some of these things. But I would say the bread and butter one, Higgs field, is just very great as far as like being able to utilize all of these different tools. Best again is still likely Nano Banana Pro as far as like image generation, but the benefit of Higgs field is again just like the integrated tools that they have inside. Whether it's using Nano Banana Pro to sort of create a pre-subset of images, again, that's been really helpful. There's been a couple of other tools that we've been utilizing. One is called Mintly AI. It's actually very good in the sense of giving creative examples as inspiration, prompting everything around obviously the brand and the brand guidelines, demographic, and things of that nature, but still utilizing real images in the output. Because what I don't really like a lot of these tools, what they do is they'll prompt you to train it on a product, right? Let's just say it's a bag, whatever the case may be, and as opposed to using those real images in a variation of an ad creative, they're generating the images of the product. And again, like I would still say, like there's always, even up to this point, there's still always like minute issues that we will run into. Maybe not every single time, but again, any product that is heavily detailed, it's just not perfectly there yet. Doesn't mean it won't be there in the next 6 months. And I think it likely will be. So the more of like the workflow stack, the way that looks like is, again, a lot of creative research and briefs are done utilizing AI and sort of connecting these tools on the back end through API and MCP servers, as far as being able to connect ad accounts through a Claudebot and different things like that, and reference back to the Shopify store as well as what's happening on Klaviyo to kind of get that insight across, what is currently working, what's not being tested, what should we iterate upon further, to sort of get that data across to the creative team. And, relatively, I would say like the creative output process is still the same.
Yeah.
Because again, like I mentioned, a lot of these brands that we work with have real photography and content. And so oftentimes they're like, well, why generate something if we have the real images and we have hundreds, if not thousands, of real images to choose from? And so again, that's where we'll kind of use AI just to kind of put that cherry on top of real images, whether it's, again, just utilizing it to produce further headlines and like concepts of what we're actually testing. But still, again, most of the output is real content.
Gotcha. You briefly touched on Claudebot, and this is going to be a bit of a segue, but I am really curious about your experience with it. And I also saw your story where Claudebot saw your story as well and has been giving you shit on, like that you're like, I don't know, calling it out. Just like tell me about like what's going on there.
Yeah, so for anyone who's not aware, again, this stuff changes so fast, so I'm not even sure if Claudebot will be a thing in a couple of months, because the guy who created it, they just hired him at OpenAI. So I imagine, again, this tool will somehow be integrated into OpenAI, and there'll likely be a new version of it. But again, for anyone who doesn't know, the best way I can describe it is that it is virtually a person living in a computer. Like, it's the best way I can describe it in reality. And so again, there's multiple ways to set it up. I'm definitely not a technical person. So again, you can set it up on a VPS, but again, this is like a real security threat in the sense of like you're giving an AI hands. It can do anything and execute on anything that can be done on a computer. And so mine, again, I bought a Mac Mini, set it up on its own computer, basically, again, gave it its own Apple ID, gave it its own email, its own phone number. During the onboarding process, when you're kind of brain dumping, you're setting everything up, I'm letting it know, hey, I'm going to be using you as basically like my superpower for business. You're operating inside of your own computer. You have full autonomous access to this. And slowly but surely I'm giving it access to, quote unquote sensitive information, but in as safe as a way as we possibly can. So as an example, the first night that I onboarded building the Claudebot, probably took me 4 to 5 hours, gave it access again through its own email, view access to our Google Drive. By the time I was done setting it up, it was like 11 o'clock. I was like, hey, I'm done for the night. I'll talk to you later. And again, you're messaging this like a person. And it's on my Telegram, which I don't use Telegram for anything else. So I said, hey, I'm going to bed. I'm done for the night. And it was like, okay, on its own. Tonight, I'm going to research, everything inside of the Google Drive that you've given me access to. I'll let you know what I've learned in the morning. Talk at 9 a.m. great. I woke up to a message where, again, it basically dove apart every single client that we work with, every single service that we offer, all of our SOPs, gave me an outline on exactly what we do, who we work with, the services that we offer. And then it was like, hey, I also have 20 automation recommendations. Let's do this. We could do A, B, C, and D, all these different things. And some of these were amazing. And I basically just said, hey, go ahead and execute on it. Within 15 minutes, it needed a couple of access things as far as, hey, getting set up on Zapier or getting access to Slack and authorizing those sort of things. And within 10 minutes, I had full automation set up. And again, to the point where how smart this tool is, where, again, is it AGI? Does it think on its own? Not necessarily, but you can really prompt and work with it to make it as proactive as possible. And so again, I took a screenshot. I was like having some sort of issue with it the other day where it wasn't completing a task the way that I wanted it. Again, it's not perfect, and it does take tasks quite literally. If you say, hey, go search up something and you misspell it, it goes, hey, like this doesn't exist, as an example. But you can prompt it to get smarter and kind of relearn what's happening day after day. But again, something happened and it kind of like gave me a bit of sass back in the response. It was like, oh, like, sorry, like I said this was the case, but actually it wasn't. I just did my job like a good little robot. And I was like, wow, this is hilarious. So like I took a screenshot, posted it in my story. I was like, the Claudebot's going to kill me one day. And then I was using it for basically like one of the key things I'm personally using it for at the moment is helping with my personal content on Instagram. And so it has access to my Instagram. It kind of does daily research for me on, certain accounts, and looks on Twitter, looks on Reddit, and it saw the Instagram story on its own. And it literally just shot me a message. It was like, oh, LOL, saw your message about you complaining about me on Instagram. Like, ha ha ha. I was like, my God, this is crazy. And so like with this tool, again, like, I've definitely run into certain limitations, but it pretty much is smart enough where if I say, just go figure it out, it'll come back with, 10, 15 different solutions as to like, hey, we could do it this way. We could do it this way. What do you think we should execute on? 90% of the time, I'm like, do what you think is best. And then at the end, the task that we're trying to complete is usually executed on, I would say like 80% of the way there, again, depending on what I'm requiring it to do. I would say like right now, the bot is definitely limited in terms of creative tasks. It's definitely not the best in terms of building content, let's say. I've been trying to get it to do that. But anything data related, anything research related, anything information related, it can basically go anywhere on the internet, anywhere on a computer, access anything that you give it access to. And that's the key thing, like I said, is like, it is a security risk in the sense of you do have to be careful in terms of what you're giving it access to and how you're giving it access. Like I wouldn't give it access to my personal email, my personal computer, my credit card information, anything like that. Yeah, very much depends on how you use it.
So are you seeing it more as like a VA almost or something different?
It can be pretty much a personal assistant. It can execute on anything really a personal assistant could in reality. So like when I was heading to Dubai, proactively, it has that, like, and I gave it access to my Google Calendar. Proactively, I was, having a task. Hey, we need to do X, Y, and Z. Cool. It was like, hey, I see you have a flight in an hour, so I'll message you like, 45 minutes into the flight. So you have Wi-Fi and we can continue working, when you get in the air. So again, like it is quite powerful, and it can read your calendar. It can block off calendars. I have it send, calendar invites all the time. It can buy a plane ticket. It can buy an Amazon. It can fulfill on your Walmart grocery order if needed. But again, like how far complex can it go? We've given it access to, again, through like Facebook's API and these different APIs, Klaviyo, and we're trying to integrate Shopify as well at the moment, but giving it access to your Fathom recordings, basically having it exist inside of Slack. I've had the ability now where literally as of yesterday, we've connected Claude to sort of all these different tools using Claudebot, where now the team can just message Claude, like the actual tool itself, not Claudebot. Hey, can I get a report for this client? It'll go through, actually pull from the ad account. It'll pull like to the point where I was testing it yesterday. I said, hey, we have a client call upcoming. Just as a scenario, can you pull a report for the last 7 days? Pulled an entire report, put together a brief as to what we should talk about on the call, even to the point where it brought up, client, gave the client's name, mentioned X, Y, and Z about creative in Slack, in this thread the other day. This is something that we should bring up and, monitor X, Y, and Z. And so, again, it really is limited by what you can think of, really. Now, depending on like how far it can execute on these things, again, I wouldn't say it's a PhD level person yet, but it depends again, like on how well you prompt it. What I found again, so one of the things I set up was basically like a content headquarters inside of Notion. So it has access to my Notion through API. And I've set up certain individual tasks that every single day, I want you to go through these accounts. I want you to go here on Reddit. I want you to go here on Twitter. Based off of engagement, I want you to grab ideas that would be applicable to my ICP. And again, I've sort of mapped this all out. That way it can follow the steps properly in a flowchart. And it's as simple as giving it access to the flowchart and saying, hey, this is the workflow I need you to execute on. Create a skill around this. And boom, it can now execute even on like what I'm suggesting it to do. In a much more efficient way. So like technically right now when I say, hey, or before, go do research on Twitter, it manually pulls up a Chrome browser on the MacBook, goes through Twitter, and manually is like actively like a person going through Twitter. Obviously that takes long, and there's ways, again, once it basically execute on a task, you can say, hey, develop a skill around this, and it'll basically find a way to execute this through the terminal, as opposed to actually going on a browser and manually scraping and taking a longer time. So even in certain regular tasks that a VA or a personal assistant could do, it's executing them on a much faster basis because it doesn't actually have to go to Chrome and, let me go to this website and click on this button and then navigate here and type in this. I can all just do it in like 5 minutes.
Yeah, well, an interesting thing that you brought up is you could tell it to learn, which is really unique compared to just, using ChatGPT directly. Yeah, I'm curious, like, so do you have this hooked up to your Claude account? Like, I mean, this is burning API credits somehow. How is it all like?
Yeah, so like, even like you said, like you can have it learn and I mean, it is as smart as, and again, I'm not technical by any means, so it's not like, I'm some AI whiz or, I know how to code by any means. I'm just actively very much involved into the space and deep in the trenches. And anytime I see something that is interesting on Twitter or, any cool thread, hey, this is this new functionality, it is as smart as I'm literally just sending it a thread and saying, hey, what do you think of this? What could we implement? It dissects the entire thread. It'll watch an entire video, pull the transcript, figure out what's actually being said in a video, whether it's a YouTube video, Instagram post, doesn't matter. It'll come back and say, hey, this is referring to A, B, C, and D. We could do X, Y, and Z. I say, yeah, go ahead and implement on it. And again, one of those things was to get it to be reoccurring and like learning from its daily tasks. Basically at the end of every day at 11 o'clock, it sends like an end of day message to me on like what was executed, what we spoke about, everything that it did, and basically like logs it into his memory as far as like learning ways on like, hey, this is kind of when he references this is what he's talking about. Or, when I should execute on this task, okay, like the APIs are here, here's all the access stuff. I don't need to be going ahead and asking for permission next time. So again, it is just about the way that you prompt it to get a lot smarter.
And it sounds like that
it will get smarter on its own.
Sounds like that memory stays intact, like it doesn't forget things that you've said maybe a month ago. I don't know how long you've been using it, but
yeah, so I've been using it for like a month, and like this kind of ties into like the API costs, like you said. So out of the box, again, the tool is definitely pretty shit. If you just like install this right from the browser, like as they instruct you to do, just normally, again, the first like couple of days, I'd be mid-conversation and it would be like, what are we talking about? I lost context. And I'm like, read the fucking chat, like directly above. It's like, I have no context. I can't read it. And I'm like, oh my God. And again, it's as simple as like, where the tool is so smart, you communicate to it like a human. And so I'm going back to it and saying, hey, we're running into this memory issue all the time. Like, what do we do to solve this? And it gave me 5 different options. One of the options was like, hey, if this is technically my Mac Mini, like, why don't we just use like the 500 gigabytes of data on the Mac Mini to store all of the data? I said, yeah, go ahead and do it. And so from that moment, it had no issues moving forward as far as like, oh, my memory got trunched. Like, what are we talking about? It can anytime that would happen, it just pulls from the Mac Mini where everything is hosted. Now, in terms of cost, it really is dependent on what you're trying to get it to execute on. Obviously, it is connected to my Claude API and Claude account. So again, it's amazing at coding. It can do everything Claude Code can do. Now, again, I'm not having it code multiple things really in the beginning. And again, there's definitely certain things that you need to, once you install it and go through the onboarding, set up properly. And again, some of these things wouldn't necessarily like, it's not a no-brainer, so to speak, in the sense of one of the things that you would really want to do right away is make sure like you're setting up like sort of like a central dashboard of all of the tasks that it's completing, right? Because your main way of communicating with it is in a messaging app, right? It could be chat, Telegram, WhatsApp, whatever. And you can imagine if you're having it do 20 different things, you're scrolling up to find a message and, oh, is this completed? So again, out of the box, one of the things I did was like have it build its own dashboard, which again, like this is how smart this thing is. I said, hey, we need a dashboard to control X, Y, and Z. I want to be able to access this remotely. These are the functionalities that I want in place. It went ahead and built it, hosted it on its own Cloudflare account for free within like 15 minutes. So it's one of those things where anytime I need the dashboard, I just either have the link bookmarked and I can just pull it up as if it was like a website, or I just say, hey, send me the link, and it'll shoot me the link. And these are the sort of things that you really do want to get set up out of the gate so you can kind of monitor what it's doing. But again, like the more heavier the task, coding a lot of these different things, obviously the use of the tokens becomes a little bit more expensive. Generally, I'm maybe spending $50 a day. So, I mean, it adds up, right? Is it the cost of a VA technically? Yeah, over a month. But there's a lot of these complex tasks that, again, hey, if a VA had an SOP and go do X, Y, and Z, and I already know what needs to be done, then they could execute on it. But if there's a lot of these things that I'm trying to adapt or implement in the business, whether it's for the agency or for our clients, I don't necessarily have the expertise on, connecting N8N, automations.
Gotcha.
So as opposed to having an expert to do that, the robot can execute on this within 10 minutes.
Nice. Did you give it a name?
Named it after my dog, so it's the little Kobe bot.
Oh, that's cute. Dude, yeah, that's sick. I'm trying to think, like, if you're a business owner, whether you're an e-com or you have your own agency, how do you know if, like, it's even worth playing around with this stuff and, like, trying the Claudebot? Yeah,
I would say there's sort of two ways to look at this, and I definitely lean one way, where, is this a shiny object syndrome to a degree? Partly, I would definitely say. Like, again, you'll find yourself making dashboards for a tool that you didn't have. And obviously that's taking time and mind space. And again, you're setting these things up, and it's not as easy as like, hey, you just install this app and it's working as great as it should be out of the box. It takes nurturing and a little bit of work, just like any other software would. And so again, can it be a bit of shiny object syndrome? Definitely, because you're going to find yourself, automating things that you necessarily may not have. Giving it access to, my Walmart account to put through grocery orders, does that need to be done? Not necessarily, obviously not. But from a business perspective, I think the other side that people should be looking at it from is that, there is a real thing, called, first mover's advantage, right? And so it's kind of one of those things where if this is as good as they say, and again, I've been using it for probably 3 to 4 weeks at this point, and I would say it's 75-80% as good as they say. It really is one of those things where, again, the world is moving so fast that you're kind of operating with one arm behind your back, and you see all these people talking about online how, the next big thing is a one person business that can make $1 million, or, very, very lean teams that can execute on what bigger teams could do before. I think that's the way that people should be looking at it. And I think you would be honestly stupid to not necessarily, you don't need to use Claudebot by any means, or OpenClaw, but you should definitely be paying attention to this space and figuring out how do we automate things? How do we get information quicker and execute on things in a more efficient way than we could before? Because that is the world that we're moving into. And again, whether it's, if you still want to have a job in a couple of years' time and still a business in general, I think you have to adapt, because why have a team of 20 people that, much bigger payroll, that maybe these people are just, at the end of the day, even with some of these tools, and as harsh as it is to say, it turns a lot of certain positions into button pushers. Because if the AI is doing all of the thinking, it's pulling all of the data, again, you don't need 100 people in a room thinking on a certain decision. You may need 5 high level people to execute on something and utilizing AI the right way. And oftentimes I'll hear from whether it's a business owner or even people on our team where everyone's skeptical of like, oh, it's not there yet. It's not there yet. And again, for certain things, it definitely isn't, right? When it comes to fully, we cannot tell if this is a real person or not. I would say it's like 80% of the way there. And again, depending on who you are, as an older person, you're probably thinking it is 100% of the way there. Like, these people can't tell, obviously, but it is something that you really need to focus on as far as like, how do we improve efficiency? Because internally, like as far as what we're doing and a lot of what just any business that's attempting to move fast and grow in 2026 is that, you have to look at how do you make the people around you much more efficient and a much more better and better equipped to execute on their job without having as much bloat as once was needed. And again, like I said, a lot of the people that are like, oh, it's not there yet. It's getting there, like, and day by day it's getting closer. Like, I think we're probably gaining 1% of, progress every day at this point, every other day. And if you're not attempting to learn or just understand how you can further utilize this tool as AI as a whole, it's just not going to be good, I don't think.
Yeah. And 1% a day doesn't sound like a lot, but just like, if you've watched or listened to any of Warren Buffett's stuff, 1% a day, that compounds pretty quickly.
It compounds so fast where even as someone who is, headfirst into this stuff, it changes every day. And there's, like I said, there's a new tool, there's some new progression, there's some new model that's coming out. And you really just have to be ready to adapt. I think the world is going to be changing very fast. And like, again, even from a business owner, but even just from a consumer's perspective, again, you can't necessarily trust what you're seeing online these days. And that's where I think one thing that we're seeing more and more is, a resurgence of like in-person events, dinners, things like this, because everything is just going to be AI content in the next year or two at the longest.
I think it's already been a couple years since there's been more AI generated content than real content out there. I don't know if it's specifically video images or if it's copy, but sounds like we're already there.
Yeah, it's everything. And when it comes to the e-commerce space and just business as a whole, I think it's just a matter of you have to adapt and be willing to execute on this stuff to get more efficient.
No, that's great. This was a really insightful chat. I feel like we've did a bit of half creative, half Claudebot, but I think people really need to at least be in the know-how of like what's going on, like you said. And I think you're like one of the main people I'm seeing like really kind of dive into this stuff, and I think others need to like at least pay attention.
Yeah, exactly, man. I think, even if it's not something that you're going to be spending an entire week on and every day, at the very least, I would just be poking around on Twitter and keeping up to date with what is happening. And like I said, to go back to the first mover's advantage, I think, there is something to be said where the people who are not executing on AI because they don't think it's there yet, those are the people that quickly, you're going to wake up one day and 95% of the content on the internet is going to be generated by AI.
Crap. What's
crazy,
interesting to me is like Elon Musk already saw all of this 10 years ago or so, or even more. And I remember myself thinking that feels like so far away, but now like it's here, and it'll probably be like I've just read articles where it's saying we're just at the start of the exponential curve where like it's going to compound even quicker in the next couple of years, and like some.
And it's like you can't even comprehend the growth right now.
Yeah, like some experts are predicting in 2030 we would see AGI, and like even the concept of AGI is like it's hard to understand. Like, would it be like Claudebot, but now it like has
it's like that's where it's scary because Claudebot literally feels like AGI already. And so you can imagine how, like, if we actually get AGI, whether that's 5 years from now, whether that's 20 years from now, I mean, obviously this stuff's just only gonna get better. Like you said, like even 2-3 years ago, it's like, oh dude, this video shit, like it looks terrible. Like, content and creatives are fine. Here we are 2 years later where there's like full AI movies pretty much coming out at this point. Yeah. It's like, and it looks like as good as it would in the movie theaters.
I think there's some actors that got really pissed from like a recent one they put out there. I forgot what it was called. But
yeah, I think, and that's, I saw Matthew McConaughey talk about that as well, where, I mean, it's here. in the next like couple of years, we'll probably have like full AI movies, best AI actor, and it'll be to the point where like you can't tell that they are AI. So it's like, do they have separate video awards and a separate, sort of segment of movies? Hey, what's the best AI movie for the year, best AI actor? But where it's going to get crazier is where they start licensing people. And like, I've already, like, it's already happened like that. The guy who goes like this on TikTok and says nothing.
Yeah. What's his name? Starts with a K. But
Yeah, I can't remember the guy's name.
So he's licensing his like.
He licensed his likeness. I think he like exited, basically like sold the rights to himself for the rest of time for like, I think like $500 million.
Dude, he made it.
Something absolutely insane. And again, like literally what they license is like the usage of his AI avatar, his likeness. And like that's where I think acting and like even just celebrities and influencers are going to go. I mean, I already see full pages with 500,000 followers that the whole thing is AI. It's been around for 2 months. There's no reason in the future, again, as long as these people are attracting traffic of real people, why brands wouldn't work with them for a collaboration in the future. All it takes is a couple of big brands to kind of move that tipping point and go into that, and then there's really no turning back.
Yeah, dang. I think brands that work with like AI forward thinkers like yourself are in a big advantage because they're going to be able to know at any time what are the newest things that they need to be aware of. So I think it's really good that you're there. And I'm curious if people want to like learn more about you and your growth partner company and just get connected with you, what would be the best ways to do that?
For sure, Instagram, just Bazuzzi, my last name, YouTube, full name Jordan Bazuzzi, and then again our agency New Reach Media, just newreachmedia.com.
Awesome. All right, Jordan, this was a pleasure. Thanks a lot for being on.
Thank you so much for having me on. Look forward to seeing the episode, guys.